Welcome to another Screenfish One-on-One. This week is an exciting one for me, a very special one, as I get to talk to two friends of mine who have a special project as well. It's always a pleasure to speak with David Peck and Nathanael Draper. Welcome to you both.
Thanks.
Thanks for having us, Steve. It's a pleasure to be on the show again.
Yeah, likewise. Yeah, I feel the same way. It's good to be here.
Well, you guys are always welcome, and I'm really excited about this particular film we're talking about today because it's yours. You know, I've had you all on before to speak about other people's films, but today we get to talk about Broken Courage. And I would just love to hear from you both. First of all, like, what is it that started this journey? Because I know I'm not sure, Nathaniel, how long you've been on, but I know for David it's been like 8 years, 8-year journey. So what is it that started you on this, and why are you so passionate about the project?
So, I mean, it's might sound a little cliche to sell it to say that it started in with a story. I met Suon, the subject of the film, and also a co-writer in the film, actually, back in 2004 at the Siem Reap War Museum in Siem Reap, Cambodia, and was kind of blown away by his story. And we wandered through this museum and got to know him a little bit. And then I sat down and we had an extended conversation, my wife and I, and Suon, for about 45 minutes to an hour. 10 years passed, and I'd been working in and out of the country on various projects. I decided to go back to the museum to visit it just to see, wouldn't it be marvelous if that guy still worked at the museum? And I didn't remember his name. I went back and he was there. I mean, this is the shorter version of it, but serendipity, capital S, all the way. And as soon as I saw his face, I knew it was him. And I went up to him and I said, "Hey, 10 years ago, we sat right over there. You told me this." And then he started smiling, and, we should have hugged, but it probably would have been culturally inappropriate on a variety of levels. But anyway, that was sort of the beginning again. And I did an audio interview with him back in 2014. So that's nine years ago. And then over the next several years, started to shoot it with a couple different cinematographers. And then Nate joined the project, I guess, probably about five years ago, as doing a little bit of everything. So it's been a real long haul, Steve, as you know. And I've learned why they call documentaries like this labors of love.
For sure. I mean, I've had the privilege of sort of walking with you from the sidelines, and
right,
just as the various stages of the project, and I know how difficult this has been for you to get it going.
It's super hard. Nate's got a ton more experience, editing and directing and filming and all of the above in the industry than I do, and I remember being, on my podcast, I interview directors all the time on Face to Face, and I remember telling one that we had, good news, we're finished. The shooting's done and we got a great edit and the music's been composed. And he says, "Wow, that's great news. You're 50% of the way there." And I'm like, what are you talking about? And that's when I really started to realize just how much a producer does, how much is going on behind the scenes, and when these passion projects, man, because you're in on so many levels, right? You've been pulled in. So there's a real I have a newfound respect for anybody who's finished a film. That is for sure.
And Nathaniel, what is it that brought you in? Like, what excited you to be a part of this project?
I wanted an excuse to go to Cambodia, so I had been wanting to travel
Nice.
there for a very long time.
Yeah.
And there's more to it than that too. So I was originally, I think I first came on board to help David with a trailer. He was trying to raise some money. He was about halfway through. This would have been halfway through for David's timeline.
That's right.
Because as he mentioned, I came on it was about 5 years ago, but he had already amassed all this footage, and there was a lot of great stuff that was there. And he was looking to raise a bit more money so that he could finish it. And so I cut a trailer together, and then we just started chatting about it. And then I became more interested in being more heavily involved in the project. And then he basically suggested that I could actually come to Cambodia, bring my camera, and I could help film the rest of the project. And I just got more and more involved as I, went to Cambodia, met Suon. I spent a long time, like before the trip, just reading as much as I could about the history so that I was as familiar with it as I could be when I got there. So the draw for me, though, from the beginning was I thought it was really interesting, a story about a guy who was thinking about his actions in the past and being open about what he did as a child soldier, and then trying to reconcile for what he had done. And so I thought the thing that was so cool for me was the image of this guy walking around a museum where he's basically surrounded by these artifacts from his own past and these own, like, basically evidence of things that he was a part of, and speaking openly about it, and coming from a place of really wanting to do right from what he had done in the past. And I thought that was very compelling, this story about a guy who was wrestling with what he had done and trying to move forward while also being like physically situated in this place where he's like, it's a constant reminder of the place that he's been.
See, that's fascinating to me, and I love the film, and I know we're friends, but I really think it's a phenomenal film. Like, it truly is. And the centerpiece of the film is Suon and his relationship with Cambodia and this fantastic museum, as you're saying, Nate. Just from you both, can you talk a little bit about Suon? Because what's your relationship like with him? There's got to be a ton of trust here that's built up over time for the two of you to get him to speak so openly and freely, not only about his own life, but also the culture as well.
I just want to point out that I think the profit sharing on this film really drew Nate to the project as well.
I mean, I wasn't going to say that, but
rich beyond our wildest dreams, Steve. I mean, come on.
As most documentarians are.
Oh yeah, especially
that's where the money
filmmakers.
is.
Yeah, first-time filmmakers, man. Nothing. It's just it's a license to print money, man. So Suon, of course, Suon and I have become good friends. Nate and I and Suon and Melissa and Salong, for those of you who will hopefully get to see the film, we've all become friends. So there's a community that is absolutely developed. And you're right. I think trust is huge, because what's interesting to me, one of the first trips I made into Cambodia was back in 2003. And one thing that I was really struck by culturally was the Kingdom of Wonder, beautiful country, beautiful people, but there seemed to be this veneer of a thin veneer of trust with most of the people I met. And I remember speaking to some people post our 3-week trip there, and, oh yeah, you nailed it. This is exactly right. That's clearly something, you picked up on. And so it was really important to me that we were able to build that over time. But I do feel like, right from the get-go, Suon and I had something going on. I didn't feel, even as a tourist back in 2004, I didn't feel like Suon was just working me for a tip. He was really, it was important to him that I knew what the real story was. And then when he found out I was Canadian, he wanted to talk about the landmine treaty, that Lloyd Axworthy was involved in, and the way we were forerunners and so on. And I thought, wow, this guy, he's got a lot going on. And so, yeah, I think you're bang on about the trust thing. But the fact that there's this community that's developed, I think, has actually added to the film. And it was really important to both Nate and I think, to include Suon as a co-writer, because, well, it's his story.
Yeah, I love that aspect about it. I love the fact that you've included him in this process. And forgive me for asking it in this way, because I'd love to know what would drew you to Cambodia per se, because, not to put too fine a point on it, 2 Canadian white guys. And Cambodia feels like worlds away. What is about this country and the story working with Suon that you wanted to bring to life?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to let Nate answer that first, and then I'll give you a little bit of my background. But it really was, for me, serendipity all the way, and being introduced to Southeast Asia back in 2000. So it's a very long story for me, but I'd love to hear Nate's answer.
Yeah. Well, I guess my interest in Cambodia like goes back many years when I'd actually first seen the Killing Fields. And I was in high school when I'd seen it, and it was one of those things
Powerful
like
film, man.
I didn't know, like I was a teenager watching and going, oh, I didn't know that this happened. And then as entered into like my 20s, I started getting interested in traveling. I went to Thailand at one point, and I met a few people who had been to Cambodia. And it was just always a country that I was very fascinated by the history. Um, and I thought I was puzzled and intrigued by this like history of this, like the Khmer people who'd built these great temples. And then there was also this story of the killing fields that happened in the 70s. So as a country, it was just like a history. Like I'm also a big fan of history, so that angle to it intrigued me as well. But then specifically like with Suon and building the relationships there, by the time I'd gotten there, like David had already fostered like a very close friendship with Soon and our other friend, Mr. One, who's also in the film, and Salong. So for me, it felt like, I don't know, I felt like I was kind of like getting invited in a way, into this like really nicely knit community of people. And then I was kind of just there to hang out with them and capture these really nice moments of them. Like there's this one scene where they're just having like a little picnic together, and it was fun because I could kind of just like sit there and observe and watch. And I felt like, yeah, it felt like I was able to kind of sit back and just kind of take a look at things, as an observer. But yeah, it's a place, sort of wrapping that all up. It was a place where the history I thought was just, I found it very fascinating. And then as I got there and I met people, they've also become very good friends of mine. So there was then a personal connection to it, in that like, oh, these are now people who I know and who I actually have a very personal connection to, and they're my friends and I care about them. So the stakes are also in that, like, I want to be a part of it because I also want to be a part of their lives and their stories and sharing their experiences as well.
And I think, I think Nate did a great job of listening really, really well. And that was super important to me, being involved in the project, having spent years in international development. I think, the white man's burden, it goes pretty deep. And so I think one of the things we've not done very well, Steve, is, we haven't listened very well. We haven't kind of embedded, and we really tried to do that. It was super important to be respectful, to represent this small community of people, largely Soon and his story, in the most authentic and transparent and meaningful way that we could, that would make it relevant not only to I guess Western viewers, but also Cambodian people as well. That was really important to us. At one point, we had a few experts in the film for a brief month or 3 weeks. I was maybe being considered a kind of a bookend. I was going to provide some context maybe, and then we decided, nope, let's not go there. It really is, we've really tried to let Soon and the others tell their own story, and I hope we've succeeded in that way. But for me, it was like Nate. I was sort of, when I first found out about the 70s killing fields, of course, I read a book years ago by Brian Fawcett, and the book's called Cambodia, and the subtitle is A Book for People Who Find Television Too Slow. And I had read it in 1992. And so this is 8 years before, and the Khmer Rouge, and it was just this, I don't know, I'd seen Platoon, I've seen Apocalypse Now, where references are made to this part of the world. I probably couldn't have even found it on a map. And yet I was, like Nate, pulled in historically, politically, ethically, morally, and I was kind of outraged at what had happened and how ignorant, frankly, the West is, not only of that part of the world, but also their involvement in it. When you start to unpack the illegal bombing of Cambodia in the late 60s and how it went on, and the connections to the Vietnam War. I mean, I don't know how you can't not be outraged at some of what happened, actually at most of what happened, I suppose, during that period. But they call it, if you ever get a chance to visit, Steve, I think you'll understand why they call it the Kingdom of Wonder. It's just such a perfect phrase for me.
Yeah, I mean, I've never been, But I know you've both been down multiple times now at this point. So I can only imagine what it's like down there. It must be beautiful. But I was wondering, speaking of going down there, I know the film was involved in the Cambodian Film Festival. And, as you talk about listening and sharing people's stories, I was wondering what sort of response you were getting from the Cambodian government, from the Cambodian people.
Yeah, so largely I was able to go and we premiered there. We had a full house and an incredible Q&A. We invited a couple embassies out. We had representatives from the Cambodian Film Commission and the Bafan Institute, which is a group founded by Rithi Pan, an incredible filmmaker, a French Khmer filmmaker who's made lots of great films. And they were there. We had a group of young women that were becoming lawyers, going to school to become lawyers. It was an incredible response. They gave us a second showing, and we were one of the top 15 films to see at the festival. There was an article written a day after we arrived, or 2 days after we arrived, which was, huge honor. I mean, just being there and being accepted. You can't say the country's accepted us, but at least this part of the country has, and this community. And so right now, currently, the Cambodian Film Commission, we're kind of working with them. We are working with them to hopefully come back into the country in 2024 to do a rural tour with a showing or two at a few Buddhist universities, National Museum, and they have 2 theaters, one in Siem Reap, one in Phnom Penh, and then we'll do public showings. Now, this all, of course, assumes that the Ministry of Fine Arts is going to say, yes, we approve the film. And as far as we know, that is moving forward, but we'll have to just wait and see, because what I might think, or what Nate or you might think is an apolitical story, they may see something about it that they're not crazy about, but we're really hopeful. And I think the time's right. I really do. You can't meet anyone in Cambodia who hasn't been touched in some way by the war in the 70s and the atrocities and the human rights abuses and so on, and the trauma and the mental health component of this goes deep, like it does in any culture, but very specifically for Cambodia, connected to war and post-war and all that. I mean, what's crazy about the 70s is there was another 10-year civil war after the Khmer Rouge were sort of officially ousted. It's wow. To say that it's complicated is an understatement.
Yeah, there was actually one thing that you were just saying that I wanted to touch on. That was one thing that I was struck by when I became involved with the project, was how that history is not just limited to that 4-year stretch of time of what is the killing fields. It's a much more complicated history that has its roots much further in like the colonialism, French colonialism and European colonialism that affected the lives of people in Cambodia very heavily and sort of paved the way for what ended up happening. But then even after the killing fields, there was this long, very complicated history that Suon was also living. So it was one of those things where, like, as I was getting more and more involved, just realizing like how complicated just all these layers are. And that was also like, it just sort of drew me in further and further, just all the many different connections between things, historical, political, and then how it affected like people who I knew.
Well, that begs a great question for you both. And again, you can answer as honestly as you want, but how does an experience like this change you? Because, we live here, we live in Canada. And for you two to spend so much time over there and sit in the history and sit in the challenges of this people, as you said, Nate, it's not isolated into a small block. This is an extended, there's depth here. I'm just wondering what you both take away from this experience, from all this listening that, you'd said, David.
Yeah, I mean, I think on some level, honestly, this is going to sound trite and like I'm just trying to get a laugh, but I think on some levels, it's still too early to tell. I think that this will continue, this part of my life will continue to, I hope, reshape my understanding of the global South. It'll help me to come to a better understanding of, what does it mean to live vulnerably? How do mental health issues impact me and my life and my family? I mean, aren't we all surrounded by these kinds of issues? Now, obviously not a child soldier in my case, but dealing with my own, set of issues and baggage and so on. So I think it's going to have an impact there, and a continued impact. But I hope, Steve, I'm more empathetic. I hope that it has appealed to my sense of compassion. I hope it's made me a better filmmaker, a better storyteller, a better podcaster, better father, and I have a new friend. Well, I have many new friends, but especially in Suon, and Salong and I continue to stay in touch. I so hope your audience gets to see the film, because I think we were able to draw out the rapport between these individuals and the connection and how important that was. And it's been super important to me. It strengthened my understanding of what it means to build community. And interestingly enough, I'm hoping maybe that the next film that I make, I don't know if Nate and I will do it together, but I want to do a short film on how Suon's life has actually impacted mine. So the idea of the other, having an impact on this Westerner who kind of came in with eyes wide open, and so yeah, it's a great question. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, it's difficult to articulate how it's like to put it into words. It's definitely, maybe there are things that I maybe had been aware of before, but just living or like spending a significant chunk of time somewhere else and then just being confronted with it, or just like faced with it in a different way. Like I'm thinking, David used this expression once. I can't remember if you were quoting somebody else, but the idea of the accident of geography. Because at one point earlier on in the filmmaking process, and we played around with this kind of parallel between your story and Suon's story, how like you're both born around the same time and both like had very different lives, and just based on where you were born in the world, how the course of your life went. And that was something that I thought about a lot, because Salong is he's the same age as me, and having this, like him and I have had conversations like that where we go, oh, well, isn't it interesting that like how like I was born in Canada and I've had this life and you were born in Cambodia, and like we've both had very different experiences as a result of that. And so it's been thinking about, I guess, the way in which sort of the way we're all connected globally, and yet how this, going back again to history, how things that happened hundreds of years ago have set things up so that people's lives will be, I don't want to say completely determined, but there's a way in which, that accident of geography will really impact, like completely changes the courses of people's lives. So but that's like just one thing. And like I said, it's difficult for me to put it into words, because it was more of, I guess it was more like a feeling when I was there. Once you're there, like you can't, it's so hard to then come back here and then say, oh, this is like what I learned. It's more, there's something
Nate,
deep inside that I just feel differently. Yeah.
Isn't Nate, isn't it the kind of thing too you understand years later, right?
Exactly.
You look back and you go, oh yeah, right, this did actually hopefully make me a better listener and a better international development worker and a better filmmaker and so on. But I love what you said, Nate, about the connection, because I think, Steve, another thing, well, you must see this with all the storytelling and the reviews you write and the interviews you do. Aren't we kind of all connected? I mean, it sounds so trite again, so cliche. Oh, can't we all just get along? Well, I think there's a real deep truth there that points to a greater truth. And we're not so different from the, what is it now? The UN says about 205 countries around the world. I don't know how many there are, but there's lots. So yeah, the similarity through difference for me was just really bolded and italicized, and that we have way more in common than we think.
Well, and we live such isolated lives. I use that term loosely because, we now, with the way that we're able to connect online and whatnot, the world feels very, very small. But the truth is that, a Toronto experience does not understand If you root it in one location, you don't understand what's going on in other parts of the world. And I can only imagine what it would be like for you both to be over there and realize how history has been unraveling in this space on the world. And yes, we may be connected as the human race, but there's also a disconnect until you're physically present in that place.
Yeah, it makes a huge difference. Yeah, that being taken by the hand, sort of, if you will. And I think that's what Suon and Salong and Mr. One and others have done for me, certainly, is they've kind of led me through their stories.
Yeah.
And I think I was so blown away on so many levels that I remember saying to the first Shondell, who was with me on a trip, saying, if you could come and meet my friend Suon, and if you fall in love with him, let's go make a movie together. Right. I felt compelled to tell this story so that others could learn, so that others could understand. And I hope that's what continues to happen.
Just a question for you both too. Talking about Suon for a minute here. Obviously, Suon has seen the film. He's been involved in the film. What do you think from your conversations with him? What does Suon, and yourself, but what does Suon hope the film accomplishes? We hear about him trying to educate the people of what took place prior to year zero, if you will. But do you think that Suon believes that healing can happen? What does he want to see take place?
You want to go, Nate?
Yeah, sure. That's difficult to answer. I mean, I can only guess, really, but my suspicion is, and this is basically coming from conversations that I've had, and I'm just also maybe extrapolating a bit from his experience with the museum, because the whole thing, like, I kind of see the movie as maybe like an extension of his like tour guide work from the museum, and that was the way I approached it too when making it. Was how would it like with the museum, he's really trying to like show, because the other thing too that's interesting about Suon is he's a visual artist. He does sculpture, so I think he's always been someone who, and there's another thing that comes out through the film where he does his drawing over and over again. That's a kind of like a meditative thing that he does, but he's very visual, I think. And so for me, I think with Suon, it's a telling his story. Like, it's always been I think a mission of his, of trying to figure out a way to really communicate what his own experiences were in a way that's like not just I'm telling you the story, but how is it like physically tangible? Like, because the museum has like artifacts that you can go and you can touch them and you can ask questions about them. And so the film, I think, is also like a way, how could we, how could Suon like extend that practice even further into a visual medium, where then there's this, there's all the other aspects of that form that then would complement, him telling his story about like, this is what happened. And so I think he does believe healing can happen. I think that is like, I do think that is what's driving him.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think he's I think any genuine storyteller believes that. I think on some level, Richard Wagame's, we use it on the website, said that stories are meant to heal. And I think most people, there is controversy here for sure. There is disagreement in the retelling. But I think there's something very transformative about the retelling if you're trusted. Back to your earlier point, Steve, if there's a community there that you are resonating with, I think we heal. I think we heal in community. I think we heal with and through and in others, and so that has to incorporate storytelling of one kind or another. And there's a wonderful scene in the film where Suon's at a blackboard in front of a classroom, he and Melissa. It was a wonderful day. And he's been there many times, connected to an NGO and a Buddhist university. I hope people can see the genuine embodied response that Suon's having. I mean, he is thrilled to be there, right? He really is. And you can see it, you can feel it, or at least I can. And if you were in the room, you'd feel it that much more. So I think he does believe in it. The question is, how much healing has he actually, been able to access? And I think that time will tell a little bit more, but he certainly believes in the film, And he certainly, I mean, the fact that he was at the same museum 10 years later, still telling those same, his same story is, I think, pretty a bold statement.
Mm-hmm. There's one more thing I wanted to add too, that it just occurred to me. I think also his Buddhist faith is also a large factor in it too, and that comes out in the film. I think he has and he speaks openly about this in the film, about how I think he genuinely is concerned, very deeply concerned about how his actions might affect for like future incarnations. And that's the thing that comes up in the film too, is how his own Buddhist practices are also tied with his experiences, and how he makes sense of his past and what's sort of moving him forward as well. And that was something that, as we were making the film, that came out more and more as we went along, and we spoke with him about it, was like, that's actually I think is very central part of his life. Like, he gets up every day, and he meditates in the morning. And we actually have a shot in the film where it's like, I actually asked his permission if I could like show up where he lived and set up my camera and just film him meditating. And so he takes it very seriously. And I think that's also a big part of what's motivating him.
Fantastic guys. I mean, we're starting to run out of time, but I wanted to mention and excited about the Oakville Film Festival this week, the 24th. But maybe you could tell us a little bit about that. Tell us how people can get to see this amazing film, and how they can be a part of this.
Yeah, you can go to our site, brokencouragethemovie.com. You can get access. Not only will you be able to see the trailer there, you'll read a little bit more about the film and so on, but you can get there's a link there that'll take you right to the Oakville Film Festival's website for tickets, direct link. But there's also the Oakville site, offa.ca. So yeah, we're thrilled to be there. The film's showing at film.ca, which is in South Oakville, and we're just, it's super exciting, and hoping the theater will be full. So we're out there hammering the pavement trying to sell tickets, but also really hoping that we make some new connections that might be able to get us in front of other audiences, whether it's academic or private audiences, through NGOs, those kinds of things. So we're definitely looking for, and then of course some kind of distribution deal would be brilliant as well. So isn't that what every filmmaker hopes for? So we'll be there showing it, and there's some industry stuff happening as well. But brokencouragethemovie.com, and you can find us on Instagram as well, and we'll keep you posted.
Yeah. If anyone's interested in tickets, the best way to go is probably just through the Oakville Film Festival website. They've got the schedule. But yeah, I'm looking forward to, I would also hope that we'd have like a theater packed full of people. But I just, for me, I'd love it, like whoever's there, I'm hoping that it's an audience that would really emotionally connect with it. And I'm really hoping that whoever shows up, it really resonates with them.
Well, I can say it. I've seen it. It's wonderful. I think it's a great film, and I mean it. I mean it anytime, and I appreciate you guys coming on and chatting with me about it, and certainly hope that theater is packed for you both next week.
Yeah, thanks.
Week. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Been a pleasure being on the show.
Yeah, this was fun.
Anytime. Thanks, guys. And I will have the links for Broken Courage below. You can click, and guys, we'll talk to you soon. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave. Thanks.